Have you ever just stopped and wondered what it really means to experience anything? To feel, to think, to just be aware? Okay, so to get our heads around this, let's start with an idea. Let's call it a field of potential. I want you to just notice. Imagine this vast, kind of formless space. It's a field of pure potential. And out of what seems like just nothing, something starts to stir. It's beginning to take shape. And then, a pattern. Connections start to form, really slowly. And a kind of order, a coherence, starts to appear where before there was just, randomness. And out of that pattern, a signal emerges. It's a piece of information, right? Something that can be picked up, something that can be interpreted. You see this process? From potential to a pattern to a signal? Well, it leads us right to this really fundamental question about our own lives. It's about the feeling of being. So how does it happen? How does all that biological stuff in our heads, the neurons, the chemicals, all that electricity, how does that create this private, subjective experience, this inner movie that is your life? This right here is what philosophers and scientists call the hard problem of consciousness. Okay, so to even start to unpack this mystery, let's first look at the way we've traditionally thought about it. The journey from matter to mind. So for decades, the main assumption was pretty straightforward. Consciousness just sort of emerges from really complex computation. The thinking was that the brain is basically a biological computer, a super sophisticated one for sure, but still just a machine. I mean, just try to picture the scale of it. We're talking about billions of neurons all firing away in these incredibly complex patterns. They create this huge network of signals, both electrical and chemical. And the idea was, our conscious mind just pops into existence from that amazing storm of activity. But here's the thing, right? This doesn't explain the feeling from the inside. It describes the how, the mechanics of the brain, but it doesn't get to the what. It doesn't tell us why it feels like something to see the color red or to get chills from a piece of music. And that, right there, is the famous explanatory gap. It's this huge chasm between what the brain is doing and what we are feeling. And it's exactly that gap that's pushed some researchers to look for answers in, some pretty unexpected places, beyond classical physics. This brings us to two totally different ways of looking at it. You have the classical view, which says it's all computational, something that just emerges. But then you have the quantum view, which suggests something way more radical, that consciousness isn't something the brain makes, but something it participates in, that it's fundamental. So, okay, if there's a quantum connection, where would you even look for it in the brain? Well, the search has taken scientists deep inside our own neurons, down to these tiny, tiny hollow tubes called microtubules. They basically form the skeleton of the neuron. And these are the potential sites where these quantum computations could actually be happening. And what's really wild is that the evidence for this is actually starting to build up. For one, experiments are showing that these fragile quantum states can survive inside microtubules for way longer than anyone thought was possible, especially in a warm, wet place like the brain. Then there's anesthesia, the stuff that literally turns consciousness off. Well, it seems to work by messing with these exact quantum processes. And maybe the most mind-bending part, there's even some evidence that quantum entanglement, that spooky instantaneous connection between particles, might be happening inside our brains. So when you start to piece all of this together, it really points toward a huge shift in how we think about, everything. About ourselves, about the universe. It suggests there's this kind of universal resonance at play. What if consciousness isn't something the brain is creating? What if it's not an emergent property of the brain at all, but a fundamental feature of reality itself, something woven into the very fabric of the universe, just like space-time or gravity? So in this view, the brain doesn't actually create awareness. It's more like a receiver, an incredibly advanced one. It tunes into it. It participates in a universal consciousness. And what you experience is its local expression. It's you. Okay, so let's bring that huge idea back down to a more personal level. Let's see how this whole new perspective changes things. This is where the pattern returns. The scale just changes completely. We go from seeing our awareness as something trapped inside our own skulls, inside our neurons, to seeing it as part of a vast universal field that connects, everything. And yet, even with this massive cosmic shift in perspective, the experience remains the same. That intimate, private, undeniable feeling of just being you, that doesn't change. And so maybe our own individual experience is something more than we thought. Not just a flash in the pan of our own biology, but maybe an echo in the field. One day, one wave. Each moment, just a single wave in a vast conscious ocean.